This is the Mind Your Own Wellness podcast with Rebecca Castano-Manda. Before we kick off today's Mind Your Own Wellness episode, I would like to mention a disclaimer. This episode and all episodes thereafter are for general information purposes only. I am not a medical practitioner and information discussed is opinion only. Please consult your licensed care practitioner or medical professional for advice as required.
Hello listeners and welcome back to another episode of Mind Your Own Wellness, the podcast. I have been notoriously relaxed with recordings because when I think I've got something to say, I then talk myself out of it. I think it's a classic case of imposter syndrome. And I feel like I've got frequent flyer points now at the hospital because I've been in and out like a yo-yo, which is really interesting because that's part of the reason why we have our guest on today, is because she's an instrumental part of the reason why I've been surviving hospital as I have been. What I wanted to say before I introduce you, well, actually, I'll get our guest to introduce themselves because she's amazing. But before I do, I wanted to let our listeners know today, while we're recording, this is your opportunity to press pause or stop and leave. And I'm going to tell you why. This conversation is probably going to may get emotional. It might make you feel sad. It is going to get very raw because we are going to be talking about loss. A very unfortunate, very deep, very sad, horrible loss that us mums don't really like to talk about very much. It's infant and baby loss. So that is the focus around today's podcast. So if you feel for any reason that this is not a podcast for you, if you feel for any reason that you're not ready or you just don't want to listen, and I completely respect that, this is your opportunity now. So we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll start off slowly because I'm not sure where today's podcast is going to take us. But as I was saying to our guest today, I messaged her last night and I said, you are my safe space. So this is going to be a very safe environment. So rest assured, whatever we talk about today, you're in a safe place. You're always in a safe place with Mind Your Own Wellness. So over to you, gorgeous soul, Jemma. Introduce yourself.
Okay, well, hello to everyone. Hi. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As I said, I've been invited to many, many podcasts, but this is the first one that I have agreed to be involved in because it does align very much with my heart and my soul and everything that you do. So I really appreciate the invitation, firstly. So my name is Jemma Niwha. First and foremost, a mother of three, wife and everything else, aside from business owner. So I have a few businesses that we will obviously touch on a little bit. My predominant business being the director of a pediatric disability organisation that focuses on supporting children with rare diseases and complex support needs, which then led into our sister business, which is an inclusive clothing brand for children with sensory aversions.
And I've got to say, the sensory, I feel for me, sensory is I feel like it's almost a loaded word. For me, when I first, and let's go back a little bit. So how this has all come about, Jemma and I don't actually know each other all that well. We literally met at her front door ever so randomly, and I bared my soul and then Jemma bared her soul a little bit. And it was one of those really strange encounters where you meet a person that you've never met before, you don't really know them, and then you just connect in the most, but how I call it, we connected over our life grenades, because I feel like saying the word trauma doesn't really encapsulate the shitstorm that has been our lives, whether it's decades ago or more recently, and they have literally been, especially for me, just a bloody grenade. And you can imagine the damage that grenades do. Already I feel like I'm building up with the emotion, but grenades just blow up your life. They change it, they hurt, they just tear you apart. So when I first met Jemma, we shared our grenades, but then she gifted me these sensory socks. And I cannot even begin to describe to you. And again, this is not an ad for the sensory socks. It's literally, and I've posted this on socials because I have a brain injury. Those sensory socks, Jemma, that you gifted me, I now wear them not only when I'm at an event, but when I'm out for long periods of time. And I wore them during hospital because, and I don't even know if the socks were designed for this, but it feels like it's almost just supporting my brain and my neuro nerves. That's not a technical term, obviously, but just to help send the correct messages. It's almost like it's just giving my feet a bit of a hug to go, okay, we can make that connection to your brain just that little bit better today. But on top of that, it's kind of like a weighted blanket for my brain as well, because when I was waiting, especially in hospital, to go in and have the anesthetic and go to sleep, I always feel that anxiety and that nerve. And then with the socks on, it's almost like that really nice, you're in a safe place hug. And it was really bizarre because I think to myself, going, sensory doesn't cover those feelings, but the socks are just so much more than, in my opinion, they're not just sensory socks. They're like a big hug.
Absolutely. And that is completely the intention. So the premise behind compression is that it stimulates the calming of the central nervous system. So depending on our body, it depends on where we get the most benefit from that compression. A lot of people get that from the feet, which, funny enough, people think, oh, socks with no seams, it's fabulous. But I guess the medical and the physiological benefits that we get from that compression on our feet and that helping us calm the entirety of our body can truly not be, understood unless you do really benefit from it, which obviously having a brain injury or having any kind of sensory overload, we find so many children in particular, if they're going to school, they've got their compression socks on, we're finding them able to sit still more often, engage in those educational activities and not being fidgeting or needing to get up and move as much. So it really does help calm the system. As you mentioned, using them in hospital has a multifaceted benefit. So not only that sensory input, but it's also helping with your circulation and stimulating blood flow when you're not moving around as much. So it has a multi-layer of benefits, which it's so fabulous to hear firsthand, how it's helped you.
They're incredible. And on top of everything else, it's holistic and natural. So to give you an idea, there was one day when I went to a market, and I remember, and it's a survival thing for me. So this was going back probably 2 years. And I remember I went to the market as a stall holder for Naturally Cos, and I had a headache brewing, and I went, okay, right, I've got this. And I had my system back then of how to get on top of it. So what I did was and back then, horrifically enough, looking back now, it's absolutely insane to think of the pain that I was in every single day. But I was taking up to 12 Panadeine Forte a day, which is just insanity. And not one doctor or specialist had said that's probably a bit much. They just kept refilling the script. So on this particular day at the market, I remember I had 2 Panadeine Forte, still didn't get, and the migraine had then kicked in. So I was there trying to function and, run a business stall and all of the things. I had 2 Panadeine Forte, gave it 30 minutes, nothing. I then had some CBD oil, which is prescribed to me, and it was just, it was too far gone. So then that sent me into a paralysis event. And then I look back at the things that I used to do to try and almost just survive a migraine. And now I've got these socks, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting that these socks are the miracle cure. That is not what I'm saying, but I am suggesting that compared to taking 12 Panadeine Fort a day, CBD oil, paracetamol, and who knows what else, getting on top of it with just this, like you described them, this multifaceted, simple approach. Most of us wear socks. It's just a different kind of a sock. And it's just, and even my daughter, because you gifted my daughter some socks as well, rainbow ones. So I wear the white ones because she stole the, I wear the white ones because she stole the rainbow. And even her behavior, she was calm and she was just, better at communicating, and she's only 4. But they are incredible. There is no doubt. And I'm really, really grateful for them.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you. And look, the clinical nurse in me says, I'm so glad to get you away from so many medications, because, that's one of the fabulous things when we are looking at compression. If it's clothing, if it's socks, if it's anything like that, how can we supplement and reduce needing to use medication? Because it's not good for us. It's not good for our body. So if it's as simple as popping on a piece of, an item, if it's clothing or socks, and getting that same benefit or reducing the need for the amount of chemical intervention, then, I think we need to try it as much as possible. And this journey of developing our sensory range is after 20 years of being a clinical nurse consultant in the disability and health space, and looking for something different. So, what can we do to help people that is not straight away handing pills over the counter? And it has been a 3-year journey to land at the products that we were happy with. That it did include a national trial of people giving us their feedback on our socks, on our garments, and saying, this doesn't work, or this seam is not in the right position, or this toe seam is a little bit still too raised and we can feel it. So, we invested a lot of money, a lot of time and energy to hear from our community and to get their input, which is something that no other company has done. We didn't want to just produce some items, chuck them out on the market, keep our fingers and toes crossed that people would buy them and go with that. We spent a lot of time analyzing what are we putting out there and getting the feedback from the people that use it every day and people that experience those challenges themselves or with their children every day, and saying, you tell us what you need and let us try and make it happen. And that's how we landed at the ranges that we have. So very, very different to every other approach of popping a new clothing into the market, which is something that we're very proud of. We, didn't hold back on how much time and effort, energy and money we invested to try and bring products to the market that will make a difference and for the long term. Because we know that if someone finds the right product, they want to keep purchasing it. And, children grow, and as adults, we know that our figure shifts a little bit sometimes. So being able to adapt or continue to come back to us to get the same benefit from their clothing is something that we've really strived for. And I think it's something that we're very, very proud that we've been able to deliver.
What I want to go back a little bit and touch base on is the importance of reducing the chemical load on our body, because that is definitely becoming a focus point and something that more and more, and I guess the majority of our audience is women. We have some men, but majority of women. And I think it's really great that women are starting to really understand the chemical load and how to reduce it. And you just touch base on it going, discussing how if you can create something that can reduce that chemical load. And to just dive into that a little bit more, when I think about the 12 Panadeine Fort that I was taking every single day, it highlights to me the amount of pain that my body was experiencing. But what it also highlights to me is that there were no general practitioners, doctors, specialists or anything suggesting, hey, is there another option here? And what I discovered later, which ended up being yet another grenade, is that Panadeine Fort, because most of my listeners are now aware of my history with bowel cancer and that I've had tumours removed multiple times, the chemicals in Panadeine Fort actually cause a constipation effect I did not know this. And if I was told, I certainly I did not have the mental capacity to take that in, because given the pain that I was in, and for at least 6 months, I could not feed myself. So I was certainly not I'm in a conscious state that I can take in this heavy information. So for about, I would have said at least 2 years, I was heavily taking Panadeine for just to function, be a parent, and exist. And it was then that shortly after that, I experienced symptoms of bowel cancer, and they had found that 25 millimeter cancer tumor growing in my colon. And even now, believe it or not, I am still recommended to take Panadeine Forte. So even after every bit of evidence and every bit of surgery and every bit of everything, the recommendation is still continue taking Panadeine Forte and maybe take some Movicol and things like that, which I now know is not the solution. So I have been in a very fortunate position to meet people like yourself who have provided the opportunity to have different support systems like socks. I met my nutritionist, who was incredible, to go, you know what, you don't actually need to do that. Maybe here's another option. And neither you or Tiss, my nutritionist, have ever said you should do this. It was just, here are the options. You get to choose. You get to take control over what your life looks like and how you want your body to feel. And you can't undervalue that support ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we're so much more conscious of that chemical intervention for us as women, and especially for our children. There's so much going on in the world of disability when it comes to pediatrics and young adults, that the default has always been give them melatonin or, give them something to go to sleep. And we're only now seeing that come to the light of, how detrimental that is for our children. So why are we not exploring more organic options to try and see what the benefit is? And it's not a miracle solution that you pop on a pair of socks and all of your problems are resolved. That's absolutely not the case. But if we can get some level of benefit that even reduces one dose of medication in that day, for me, that is a win.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that it's fabulous that we need more people coming to the market with new products. We're seeing it happening. We see markets flooded with so many different things, but this is a space that we identified a gap. There's just not enough choice. So there is a few providers in the community already doing, sensory or compression clothing. But in my 20-year career and the last 5 being so heavily in the pediatric disability space, there was not enough options. So our families had exhausted every option in the market and said, we've tried that, but for XYZ reasons, that particular product doesn't work. And it could be as simple as a seam or a zipper or a button or something that, they love the compression benefit, but there was one particular thing from the other supplier that their child couldn't tolerate it. So that's where we said, okay, this is not our bread and butter. We are not fashion designers. I'm a clinical nurse consultant. This is not what I do. So that's probably why it took us so long to come up with the products, because I cannot put pen to paper and sketch nothing for the life of me. But thankfully, that's what manufacturers and designers are there for. But we found a gap and we needed to plug it, because we've seen the detrimental effects on our families. And as in our space in Hono, we do support coordination. So our role is to facilitate access to service provision. So we don't provide therapy, we don't provide direct support workers, we steer the ship. So we identify all of those services that are needed and we wrap those supports around our families. So for us, knowing that our children or some of these children couldn't go to school because they couldn't keep clothing on. They couldn't regulate their emotions because they constantly needed that compression, and you couldn't walk around with a weighted blanket on your legs all day.
Correct.
So this is where we said, what can we do? Our families are falling apart. Our families are relinquishing the parental responsibility of their children because situations are becoming so extreme. how can we make a difference? And this is where our product came from. This is how we evolved from that experience and that day-to-day feedback from the struggles that are happening in the community. And then when we developed our socks, we made sure that they weren't size limited. So we knew financially we couldn't make clothing for size newborn to adults because we're not millionaires. We work in community services. So we needed to start small. But we knew that with our sock range, what we did, one of the benefits was we didn't go by foot size. So our socks are based by length, which means anyone and everyone can try them on. So we wanted at least one product that everyone in the community could access immediately. And our socks was the easiest option to do that. So they're available in 3 lengths. So no matter how old the person is or, how tall or short, then they can just select the length where they would like that sock to fall on their leg. And that was how we were able to incorporate or be able to offer a service to everyone whilst we slowly were able to, hopefully into the future, expand the additional clothing ranges outside of our kids' space.
That blows my mind. And when you're talking about that relinquishing parental control, that really hits home because I'm seeing so many parents of children who have been given diagnosis of the many, many potential diagnoses that are now out there. But when you are in a situation, and I know that you've probably been there yourself, as a parent, as a human being, whatever it might be, for you to be there supporting another human being at their weakest, because when we are going through these situations of uncertainty, or we've tried everything, or at least we believe wholeheartedly that we have tried everything, we are exhausted, we are defeated, we are sleep deprived, we have researched Google within an inch of our existence, we've done all of the things. And then we feel defeated. We become shells of our own existence. And then we basically just hand over anything that's left and say, I'm done. I've literally done everything that I can do. And it's so nice to have someone like you to go, I actually completely understand where you are. And I'm going to just give you a cuddle and offer you another potential solution. Because when you're that much of a shell, and I was that shell, I had nothing left to give. I was actually, total segue to the conversation, but I remember I had a conversation with a friend once, and I was at such a point of darkness, and I was so exhausted, and I had one thing in life that I needed to do, and it was going to take everything that was left in me to get it done. And I remember saying to this individual, we don't speak anymore much, and it really hurt me because I was completely honest, because I valued that friendship so much. And I said, I am not okay. And I have this really big thing that I need to do in my life. So I have to remove myself from anything else that I give energy to, because I just need to climb this one last mountain. So I have to remove myself temporarily just from the social construct. I won't be in contact for a bit. I won't be in contact with anyone. I had to just remove myself. I think it was 6 or 8 months later, I then sent this individual a message and just said, hey, thank you for being so patient with me. I'm feeling a little bit better. Can we catch up? And then the response was, I'm really sorry you felt the need to just do that to people.
Wow.
And I was gutted, going, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that I was honoring our relationship, our friendship, our connection by saying this is what I need. And it just proved to me that there are so many friends, family, whatever it might be out there, that so long as you're providing a purpose to them, a service to them, as long as you're there for them, everything's everything's sunshine and rainbows. The second you need to go, hold on, I need something for me, and it may not service them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the things that we're seeing so much in our space at the moment. And as I mentioned, we in my disability organisation, we are the only nationwide disability organisation for specialist support coordination that specialises in paediatrics. So we are nationwide, and we have a sole focus on children and young people, so young adolescents. So one of the things which is so interesting that in the last 12 months we have seen is so many of our mums now getting a diagnosis. So we have so many of our mums that we are now supporting through the diagnosis process and the NDIS application process. So many mums that have held it together for their kids, held it together for their families, hit the wall, and they're now saying, hang on a second, maybe all of this has been such a struggle because I have struggled forever and I've never explored a diagnosis. I've never asked for help. So it's so amazing to see now mums going, oh my God, they actually get that trait from me, and being willing to acknowledge, I actually think I might need to get some of my own help. And it's not just that I need someone to help me clean the house. It's actually, what have I been internalizing? What have I been bottling up for the last, 5, 10, 15, 20 years or their whole life? And a lot of that is coming out when we're doing these assessments for our kids, because they go back to talking about, what was your childhood like? What did you do? Okay, and now tell me about what your child does. And we've got these mums joining the dots. And I just want to say, supporting mums through that process and then seeing the outcome for the entire family unit is phenomenal. Once we support our mums, our families flourish. So our mums, and I know it because I do it, we spend so much time, focused on the kids and the husband and the house and the dog and everything else. When mum is doing well and mum is in her element and in her best space, those kids are thriving. So, what we make sure we do, we come in on the premise of, you've got funding for your child with a disability for us to jump in and support coordination. That is not our first step. Our first step is to step back. Let's look at this whole family unit, because we're working with a family. That's the difference with, being in the pediatric space, is we're not just here to work with one person. What is happening in this family unit? How are we looking at this holistically? Because that's what we need to do for our families to thrive. There's no point investing all of our time and energy into one person if dad is not coping, or mum is not coping. Let's actually take that step back and see what's happening for the whole family. So there's been instances where, we will have family that will pop in and buy some of our compression clothing for their young person with a disability. And the siblings are like, well, I really like that. Can I have it too? And then parents saying, they're actually benefiting from this, even though they have no diagnosis. So that's another thing with our range, is that it's not just for kids with disabilities. We have so many children without any kind of disability benefiting from these clothing. If ADHD does not meet the threshold for the NDIS, the amount of clients we have that come to us and say, my little one has ADHD, and the compression is, oh my God, it's a game changer. So I think, we're not wanting to stereotype our clothing to be, you must have a disability to benefit from this. We have sensory preferences, all of us, irrespective of who we are in nature, irrespective of our needs. So being open to explore a range is what we wanted to do. We wanted to keep it open, that you could walk down the street in our clothing next to someone without a disability, have the same identical clothing on. It'd be beautiful. You blend into the community, but you're getting that secret benefit underneath that no one else needs to know about.
I want to go back again. You're bringing up so many points that are just triggering these other conversations. And I know that, and I don't want to keep you all morning, because I do know that you have another something to do very soon. But you were just talking about, actually, I'll just give another warning to listeners now, because we are going to dive into that big grenade of child loss. You were just talking about mums especially, and the women who've held it together for their families. And I think we can both safely say that we have 100% done that. So I've never actually mentioned this on the podcast before, because I was waiting for the most appropriate conversation to take place, rather than just dropping, the bomb, so to speak, and just leaving it there, I wanted to have a guest on that we could work through it. So listeners, instead of just receiving this big news or this big piece of information, had someone, there was a discussion behind it to help them navigate what they were hearing. So when I was, and most listeners now know that when I was hit by the car, so I was in a motor vehicle crash, and as a result, so just to reiterate to anyone who's tuning in for the first time, I was impacted. I hit my head and then had a brain hemorrhage, which, because it wasn't picked up initially, then followed by a stroke. What I didn't know, because my body was in such traumatic, like, just literally, it was like a terrorist state in my body. It didn't know what to do. And I think the adrenaline was so high that I didn't actually understand the symptoms or have an opportunity to acknowledge them. And what I had found out, because because things were happening to my body, is that I was pregnant and I had lost the baby during that crash. And when I went to the hospital and they gave me that, they had explained that, and then we broke the news to our family, the response was, oh, well, I'm sure you'll have better luck next time, or it wasn't meant to be. And I've got to say, and I know that we're running out of time, but for me, that was the most horrific thing anyone could ever say to someone who's dealing with that kind of loss, is such insignificant, oh, it's, better luck next time, or it wasn't meant to be. I want to give the floor to you, Jemma, because you've been through not a similar situation. It was your own journey, and I want you to share with our audience only what you feel comfortable with. But what has been your experience with infant and miscarriage and loss?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so sorry for your loss, Beck. And a loss of any child, irrespective of, how far into the pregnancy or how far into, that little person's life, is a journey for all of us and needs to be respected and acknowledged. Yes. So I'm sorry that wasn't the case for you. Your beautiful babies are very lucky to have you as their mum. You're very amazing. So in terms of, I've been in the disability industry for over 20 years now. So the first 15 years of that was working with complex supports in terms of mental health, drug and alcohol, child protection. There was a big pivot, which obviously steered me into the pediatric disability space in particular. So in 2021, I was pregnant. I had a 2-year-old son at the time, my firstborn, and then we were expecting a beautiful daughter. Now I'm going to try and hold the emotions together. So she was born, I spontaneously went into labor at 22 weeks pregnant. And we don't know why, because my son was born at 42 weeks induced. So at 22 weeks, I had some bleeding, and I went into the hospital and they had told me that I was 3 centimeters dilated. Which, had no idea what that meant. I knew what being in labor meant, but I didn't know why, because I was only 22 weeks. So at that time, I asked them what could be done to obviously sustain the pregnancy. I even made jokes of, can you just flip me upside down and stitch my cervix back together? And they said, there's nothing we can do for you. You're just going to have to stay in hospital until you give birth, which could be any day, any time. And if she's born before 23 weeks, so that was in 7 days' time, then we would not intervene and we would not provide any care to her. We would just allow her to pass away. So as a mother, sitting in a hospital, as you can imagine, going, well, what does that mean? So for the next 7 days, at this time it was COVID as well, so no one could visit me in the hospital. I was still breastfeeding my 2-year-old, who had never been away from me for longer than 5 minutes. So he was at home really struggling because he wanted his mum. And you talk about a blank shell, that was me. I was sitting in a hospital bed, counting the hours, everything I felt, every movement, because my beautiful girl was still active and kicking and playing, and she had no idea what was going on. As the time went by, me and my husband would say, okay, 5 days down, 4 days down, because we were counting to get to this 23-week mark, because they said as soon as she is 23 weeks, we will provide medical intervention if she's born. So we literally counted the seconds, the hours, the days until we hit. I remember it being, coming to midnight on that last day before 23 weeks and saying, okay, so we've got 6 hours. If she's not born in 6 hours, then, you're going to help her. So that journey on its own was the most traumatic experience I had ever been through, because my body was going to do whatever it was going to do, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. So the level of guilt and stress that I felt as a mother, when you feel that, well, it's your body that's failing your child, that is healthy, and she was, growing and flourishing. And so it wasn't that, she was unwell. It wasn't a pregnancy that had to be terminated because of a medical condition, or she was completely healthy. So we made it past 23 weeks. We got 23 weeks and 2 days when Miss Maia decided to make her appearance. So I remember just before she was born, they brought out all these books of statistics of, if someone's born at 23 weeks, they have 80% of 90% of a disability if they're a female. And these are all the complications. And what I felt was so much, obviously it was education. So as I mentioned, I then went into labour. They had given me, obviously, all of the steroid injections to try and help baby's lungs, be as strong as they possibly can for her delivery. So I remember going into labour and the room filled. There must have been about 30 doctors in the delivery suite, machines everywhere, people in gowns everywhere, the most terrifying experience of my life. So I remember having my contractions and the doctor telling me, okay, that's it. We need to go. We need to start pushing. And I was just crying, saying, actually, no, I refuse. I'm not pushing. And again, this was the guilt of, you want me to push my daughter into the world that I know that she's not ready for, So as the doctor was like, well, she's in the birth canal. You don't have a choice. You need to push. The next contraction, she needs to, be born. The next contraction never came. My contractions stopped instantly. So my body, and the doctor said, this is you. Your brain is telling your body, no more. That you're not willing to give birth to her. So now you need to push without contractions.
What?
And I was just, obviously, I recall everything in snippets, but I had no choice because she had already entered the birth canal. So for her own safety, I had to deliver her, and she was still kicking and looked fabulous on the monitors. And so I gave birth to our little one. She was only 585 grams at the time that she was born. She came out breathing on her own, which they said she would not do. They said she would not be able to breathe on her own. And when I gave birth to her, they said she's breathing, like she's actually breathing on her own. So they obviously intervened and did what they could to get her stabilized. I was allowed to say a quick hello before they scooted her off to the NICU. Because obviously I still had to deliver my placenta, which was stuck to the cervix because she was too early. So obviously that has its own danger. They said if we can't get it off, we're going to have to take you to surgery because, tearing it could lead to a hemorrhage, which none of this, I didn't care about any of this at the time. Even just before she was born, they said, you need to make a decision if you would like to have a Caesar if something goes wrong, because if you do, based on her age, we would have to cut your tummy long ways, which would mean you may not be able to have more children. So do you want to go through saving her and risking not being able to have more children? And this was basically how it was presented to me. So, that clinical sensitivity is just definitely not there. So our beautiful girl went to the NICU. This was 19th of December, so creeping up to Christmas. So, she had her first Christmas in the hospital. That NICU journey is something that no one can understand if you haven't been there. She was one of the smallest.
Was put in NICU, so I totally appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah. And I sat by my phone 24/7 because they would call every hour, or I would call them every half an hour. How is she going? How is her saturation? How is she doing? And then they would call me and say, she's not doing good. You need to come in. And, we were lucky that we were just up the road 10 minutes from the hospital. So we were backwards and forwards, every couple of hours. I remember, and I am writing a book that goes into depth of my whole experience. But, one of the things was them saying to me in the NICU, we need you to bring in breast milk. Like, you need to be pumping. And I would sit there for hours without a drop of milk coming because my body wasn't ready for me to breastfeed. So I was in pain. My breasts were covered in bruises. And, again, it was this multitude of adding on of that mum guilt. Like, you're telling me she needs my milk because that's what she needs because she's so small and unwell, but I can't produce this milk because my body is not ready.
Correct.
So, that pressure that was being put on me to fulfill things that my body was not allowing me to do, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't me saying, actually, I don't want to. It was me crying with this big breast pump. I remember walking into Baby Bunting and saying, give me the most expensive breast pump that you have in this store because it needs to work miracles. And it took days of me just sitting in her rocking chair, pumping for hours and hours to not even get a drop. And then they said to me, you should try hand expressing. And I was like, okay, cool. That was the end of the discussion. Here I am on YouTube. What does hand expressing mean? How do I do that? Then I need, I'm going to the pharmacy and asking for syringes to try and suck up the colostrum. And so the whole process was just so horrific. We then, unfortunately, baby, they changed her feeding tube and she got a tummy bug when she was in the NICU. So she was doing so well and she was so strong. And, I just remember sitting with her every day, egging her on. You've got this, you can do this.
You do.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they called us in and they said, look, her stats are a little bit off. We think she might have a tummy bug. We're going to send off, some results because she kept vomiting. And then within a couple of hours, they called us in and they said, you need to say goodbye. We can't do anything for her. And, they sat us in this family room and they said, we can take her to Westmead and we can do a surgery on her stomach. She's only, 24 weeks at this stage, 500 grams. They said, we can operate, but we can't guarantee, one, that she would make the trip to Westmead, or two, that she would make it out of the surgery. So, me and my husband just looking at each other like, how do you make a decision like that? So I felt like all of these decisions were just pushed upon us as the parent, of course, but decisions that you don't know what the answer is. It's not make this decision, this will be the outcome, make this decision, this will be the outcome. It's make a decision and we don't know what the outcome will be. So ultimately, she became very, very unwell, and within a space of 12 hours, we made the decision to hold her for the first time and to obviously turn off her machines, which was the first time that her grandparents and her brother, got to see her because it was COVID. So during COVID, my husband and I couldn't even visit the hospital at the same time. It was just one parent at a time. So after we lost her, I remember going back to work within a couple of days, and all of my families that we work with had been sending me flowers and said, just take your time. We don't need you, go away. We'll be fine. And I remember coming to work with this numbness, but this fire inside me of, what can I do? I need to do something because, as a clinical nurse that had been working in community services for 20 years, this was the most horrific, overwhelming experience. Like, the grief aside, that whole experience was just something that I don't know how other families would go through that without, my knowledge and my experience and my exposure in my entire career. How does someone else go through that doesn't have any of that knowledge?
Do you think, with that being said though, when you were talking just now, and clearly wearing mascara was not a good choice to make today, But do you think that because you're talking about being a shell, and given all of this information that you received, do you actually think, and this is a genuine question, do you think the clinical part of Jemma was even present at all, or was it just flight or fight? Well, like,
Yeah, look,
educate
it
me on that.
definitely wasn't the clinical side where I was able to rationalize my decisions
Okay.
in any way. It was the ability to detach from the situation,
Right.
I would say, because, you know, that's something that we need to do in work all the time is let's focus on the decisions that we need to make and
Yes.
take the emotion out of it,
Yes.
which is what I was able to do. But, you know, I even said to Abraham, my husband, I don't know if it's better to know things or not know things in these situations. Because when they're firing stats at me, my clinical brain knew what they were telling me. My mum brain couldn't interpret it. So I was
Yes.
like, I don't know what you're saying. You need to just dumb it down for me. Give me the basics because
Yes.
I was not able to, you know, to process what they were saying. But that then led me to needing to be that support person for other people. So my own grief and my own journey. Now with our organization, when I came back, I pivoted to only working with children. I said, that's it. I'm now on a mission to support other mums, to support other families. And we are, as I mentioned, the only organization in this country that works with rare diseases. So a lot of our young people have a terminal diagnosis. So they have rare diseases that ultimately are very progressive and will go through the palliative care journey. And unfortunately, we will lose them at a young age. So being able to work with families and hold space for them while they can be mum and I can be the clinical reasoning for them and I can be a part of their journey, I think is something that I can't ever step away from. You know, the amount of times I've had mums crying and, you know, being on the phone to me, like, we don't know where we would be, you know, without you. And I was like, well, I wouldn't be here without Maya and without her journey, without my experience, I would not be able to help the hundreds of families that we work with across the country to make sure their children get the support that they care and they deserve, but make sure that I can hold space for those families because the journey is horrific.
Yes.
And I think being able to offer not sympathy, not even empathy, but, you know, being a bereaved parent is
Yes.
something that not everyone understands, you know, and that is what led us to where we are. And our sensory brand, M Sensory Apparel, is named after Maya. You know, so we're currently in negotiations with some of the NICUs to supply sensory or friendly or clothing to the NICUs for little bubs that are being born when they can't, you know, when they're old enough to pop some clothes on, but we don't want them wearing clothes that are going to, you know, irritate their beautiful, fragile skin. So she continues to steer my journey everywhere, which is phenomenal. We're in the pipeline of developing a documentary called Under the Same Sky, which, you know, looks at disability across the world and what does support look like for kids in other countries that are born premature. What does the NICU journey look like? What does the journey look like when they come home? And having a look at how different cultures and countries, you know, support our most vulnerable. So I'm so broken by my journey, but I'm so blessed from my journey.
I know that you need to head off soon, so we're going to wrap
That's
up.
fine.
But I did want to, there's so many things that you're saying that I think so many women, either they would welcome your kindness and love now, or maybe they might need it in the future. But going on with the NICU situation, because after I lost my baby and then the doctors had said to me, your body's probably not going to be suitable for carrying a healthy child again because of all the damage. So that was really rough going, right, so I've just lost a child and now you're saying that there's probably no chance of ever being blessed with another. And then Megan, we were so blessed to get pregnant with Megan. And I had the worst pregnancy. So my body and pregnancy is just not a good combination. However, at 20 weeks pregnant, they told us that she had a major heart defect. And it was just a lot of information. So fast forward to when we went to Marta, because we were referred to Marta. And I remember they were giving us all of this information going, when she's born, there's a good chance that she will guarantee she will need to be in NICU. They told us about NICU, and it sounded terrifying. They also showed us the little humidity cribs, or I think is that what it's called, a humidity crib? And I remember one day walking into the hospital for the appointment, and I saw a humidity crib, and I lost it. And I was still pregnant, but I lost it because I thought, just the thought of this little girl, because we knew she was a girl, we wanted to find out her gender, just the thought of her being in there. And I remember that day seeing that. And because obviously I was still heavily in recovery, my body gave up and I fell, and my husband had to pick me up because I had just, I think physically and emotionally, I just had a moment where I couldn't take anymore. It was a lot. And then when she was born, you know, she was crying and doing all the things, and I'm so blessed that we have her. And I'm also terrified that next year she will have that open heart surgery. And just seeing her in NICU, this vulnerable little baby with all the cords and under this 24/7 surveillance, and having those messages and just having that demand going, you need to do this, you need to do that, and be careful of this, and just having this and we were in a completely different situation. We could both go and see her, and we were able to hold her. So I'm so lucky in saying that she was born at 40 weeks. But I just wanted to let anyone, all of the gorgeous souls watching this right now, that if you ever experience a situation where you are just absolutely terrified, or someone's asking you a question and you're in overload, or you're just overwhelmed, or just any of the feelings where you think that it's not normal, you think that you're going crazy, you don't understand what is being asked of you, or, you know, like Jemma has just shared with you today, her horrific even birthing story where she was forced to do things that she just, it didn't feel right. And I know so many women in the same situation. Just please know that you are not crazy. You are none of the things. You are perfect, and the help is available. And like Jemma said, she has a business that literally provides support in situations like this. But please, if you're listening, you are not crazy. You are perfect. And just don't give up on yourself. All right, well, there you go. I didn't think that would get as loaded as it did. And to be honest, this is probably the first time that I've actually heard your entire story, Jemma. But okay, I think we need to wrap it up because I do know that Jemma needs to head off. Is someone there going, Mummy? Can I
came back?
I was like, oh, someone's in the corner. Okay, well, how about we wrap it up so you can enjoy your family time? Thank you so much for coming on Mind Your Own Wellness podcast. Perhaps in the future, if you're keen, we can jump on and do another episode about how you're actually supporting me with my own personal NDIS, because as you know, that has been a very frustrating process to get support. But I will leave it there. Is there anything else you wanted to add before you head off and enjoy your Friday?
No, I think it's been a pleasure. I love what you do. Keep doing what you're doing. You're
Likewise,
amazing.
Girl. Likewise,
yeah, and I would love to be back on. Please, if anyone has questions, you know, regarding anything that I have captured, please feel free to direct them over to me, and I'm happy to help as much as I can.
So for anyone watching, you're obviously watching probably via YouTube or Spotify, I think it is, but you can also listen to this on all the main podcast channels, and I will be posting a link to both Jemma's businesses. So if you do want to reach out to Jemma, have any questions, or view the range that she so beautifully explained to you and all of the benefits, please do so. But we'll leave it there for today. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in and listening to our stories, and for watching my mascara run and now look like I've been punched in the face. Jemma, I love you, I adore you, and I'm so proud of you, and have the most amazing day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.